Have you ever just stopped and wondered what the absolute untapped potential of your own mind really is? And maybe more importantly, what kind of fuel it actually needs to run at its absolute peak? Well, today we're diving into a really fascinating explainer of a traditional text. It explores this deep, profound connection between our physical vital energy and our mental power. So let's decode this mystery together. Here's a quick roadmap of what we're going to cover today. First, we'll look at the brain's amazing power, then the engine and its fuel, followed by virya, which the text calls the brain's diet. After that, we'll cover the consequences of energy loss, the concept of watering roots through brahmacharya, and finally, a really interesting practice of upward channeling. Let's jump right in. All right, section 1, the brain's amazing power. So, there's this incredibly ancient and famous saying, as in the microcosm, so in the macrocosm. The source text we're analyzing today builds entirely on this philosophy. Basically, the core idea here is that all those immense, overwhelming forces and mysteries out there in the vast universe, well, they're actually contained right inside the human body in microscopic form, and specifically, right inside the brain. And the text doesn't just stick to abstract philosophy, it actually points to history to back this up. It argues that the human brain literally has the power to reshape the entire globe. We're not just talking about changing individual lives here. We're talking about turning the whole world upside down. The source brings up the economic ideologies of Karl Marx, the terror of Hitler, the religious revolution of Swami Dayanand, and the massive shifts brought by Kemal Pasha. It uses these exact historical figures to prove a point, that worldly transformations are overwhelmingly driven by mental prowess and ideas, not just physical action. To really hammer this difference home, the text uses this brilliant metaphor. Think of mental strength as this massive, sprawling, deep-rooted tree. In comparison, our mere physical strength, it's nothing more than a single, tiny, insignificant leaf on that tree. It's a really stark comparison, but it immediately establishes just how absolute the supremacy of mental power is over simple physical force. Moving on to section 2, the engine and its fuel. Now that the text has established just how incredibly powerful the mind is, it shifts gears to a basic universal law of mechanics. The logic is super straightforward. Literally, every single action requires an expenditure of fuel. Nothing runs on an empty tank, right? I mean, if you run a mill, it has to consume wheat to make flour. If you want a lamp to give off light, you absolutely have to burn oil. A train moves by burning coal, and a motor runs on petrol. You always have to consume one thing to generate another. Which naturally leads us to a really crucial question. If every major machine on Earth needs fuel to operate, what exactly is the fuel for the brain's motor? How can these massive, world-changing mental revolutions happen without burning something in the process? Let's take a look at how this traditional framework answers that. Section 3, virya, the brain's diet. So in the context of this traditional text, the answer to that fuel question is something called virya. The text defines it as the absolute best part of the body, the supreme physical vital energy. And the internal logic here is actually quite elegant. The idea is that just as the brain is the body's most superior and complex organ, it naturally demands the body's most superior essence as its primary diet. You can basically think of it as the ultimate, high-grade petrol that's required to keep your incredibly powerful brain motor running smoothly. To back up this biological link, the text brings in a really striking claim from a Dr. Parabel. He states that a whopping 97% of his patients who suffered from mental illnesses, extreme anger, or severe dullness actually had prior disorders related to their vital energy, or virya. The text uses this to show how traditional frameworks directly tie our psychological health and clarity to the retention of our physical vital fluids. All right, section 4, consequences of energy loss. So what happens when that fuel tank runs low? Well, the text outlines a very clear list of symptoms that pop up when this vital energy is wasted. We're talking about things like a heavy head, dizziness, sleeplessness, burning eyes, a complete lack of enthusiasm, and most notably, severe mental fatigue. And you might notice that these are incredibly common complaints in our fast-paced modern world. The source essentially correlates these everyday struggles directly back to a lack of proper, high-quality brain fuel. To really help visualize this depleted state, the text leans into another sharp metaphor. Imagine a lamp, but this lamp has a secondary hole where oil is just constantly leaking out. Could that lamp possibly maintain a bright, steady flame?
No way, absolutely not. In the exact same way, a motor running on low-quality diluted petrol just cannot perform at its peak. The argument is that the constant draining of physical energy literally dims our mental brilliance.
Which brings us to Section 5, Watering the Roots, or Brahmacharya. The text draws a really vital contrast here when talking about how to actually fix this mental fatigue. It argues that taking pills for your memory or relying on shallow, superficial tricks is kind of like trying to revive a dying plant by just watering its leaves. It just doesn't work. But if you conserve your foundational vital energy, practicing what is traditionally known as brahmacharya, it is exactly like watering the roots. The core message is that until those roots are thoroughly nourished, the great tree of your mental power simply cannot flourish. And what happens when this energy is perfectly conserved? Well, the text shares this fascinating historical anecdote about Maharishi Vyas. According to the source, by preventing the loss of his vital energy and actively channeling it upward, becoming what is known as an Urtvareta, he generated the unbelievable mental endurance required to author all 18 Puranas. It's presented as proof of the monumental creative output that becomes possible when vital energy is strictly conserved. Let's move to our final section, Section 6, the practice of upward channeling. So, how exactly do you do this? Well, the text shares a highly practical technique from a Mahatma, breaking it down into 4 straightforward steps. First, whenever you feel the physical urge of that energy wanting to flow outward, you just pause. Second, you use sheer mental force to actively pull that energy upward through your spine. Third, you vividly visualize drawing that energy all the way up and establishing it securely right inside your brain. The text actually compares this to drawing milk from a cow. Finally, the claim is that if you practice this mental visualization with intense focus, you can achieve complete calm in under 5 minutes, literally transforming a physical urge directly into brain fuel. We've definitely explored a very different paradigm today through this traditional text. And as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on, based on everything we've just covered. Is it possible that the constant mental fatigue, the stress, the brain fog that so many of us experience today isn't just caused by external pressures? Could it actually be the unnecessary expenditure of our very own highly potent vital energy? It kind of makes you wonder if there's an incredibly ancient solution hiding right inside our modern problems. Definitely something to think about, isn't it?